So yet another turntable has followed me home, and actually yet another realistic turntable. This is an LAB 2100. As you can see, it is a linear tracking turntable. It does not have a conventional tone arm. It has what's called a P-mount cartridge on it. So the owner said this was his wife's and that it worked. So let's give it a shot and see what happens. So it powers up, so that's good. Hit play. The motor is spinning. That's a good sign. And nothing is happening with the arm. So not a huge surprise there, but we need to figure out what is wrong with this thing. So the tone arm is also a little floppy here. Doesn't seem to fit very well in its rest, so that's certainly a concern. This is a direct drive turntable. So I looked at the service manual that I downloaded from vinylengine.com. So I'm going to remove the platter by yanking it upwards. And the disassembly procedure begins with screws that are underneath the platter. So I've inverted the turntable, putting it up on my padded bricks so it doesn't damage the tone arm. I'm going to remove the base with these perimeter screws. So having removed the screws top and bottom, the instructions then say to move the tone arm to this middle position to the slot so that the top can come off and the base can come off. So I tried to film that, but I did it with great difficulty, which may suggest one reason why this isn't working. So let's see if we can get this apart. Okay, so I got the top off. So with most turntables, most of the parts are actually attached from the underside to what we would call the top or the plinth, but this turntable is the opposite. So everything's attached to the base and the top comes off. So looking around, it looks pretty clean, but this is actually pretty good news. So while the tone arm itself moves back and forth on these slides and is activated by a cable back here, there's two motors in this turntable. One makes the platter turn and one moves the tone arm. Most automatic turntables have only one motor and then a mechanism that works. Of course, the function of this motor is to move the tone arm, and it's got a belt, and the belt is broken. So that's good news in the sense that we might just be able to replace that belt and get it working. So if I Google realistic LAB 2100 belts, I get at least 3 options from Amazon, from LP Gear, from eBay. So I'll order one of these up. So this turntable was made in Japan by Micro Seki, I was able to figure out, who made a similar one for other brands such as Luxman. And it made 3 appearances in the Radio Shack catalog. In 1984, it was $220. In 1985, $200. In 1986, it was down to $160. So that's a drop from, in today's money, $680 to $460. This is toward the end of the golden era of turntables, of course. So I've gotten the mechanism nice and clean using WD-40 as a solvent, and Q-tips and toothpicks and a toothbrush to clean these gears. Then I cleaned the pulleys of the motor, and here with isopropyl alcohol, I didn't want those to be slippery at all. So I'm going to re-lubricate it with this Super Lube multi-purpose synthetic grease. That's good for plastic parts here, and then we'll be all ready for the new belt. So I've put the grease here on this part here, and then I'm going to run it through in both directions to distribute that grease nicely. So all I have to do is put this new belt on. Okay, so before I get too much into it, let's see if this belt worked. So I'm going to power it up. That's interesting. So it sort of calibrated itself. It moved the arm over to a resting position. And let's see what happens when I press play. Wow. It works. So Q, make it go up and down. and it does. This will move it to the left or the right. Q would make it go down again, and it does, even goes down soft. And play cut should make it stop. Wow, that is pretty remarkable. So I don't like the angle that the tone arm is at here, so I think something needs to be done about that, but at least it works, and that's a good start. So to get access to the tone arm and to remove this top piece so I can get to the what appears to be an adjustment screw on the other side, I have this special spanner bit I'm going to use to loosen this on both sides and take it out. This is also how you adjust the pressure, I believe, on the tone arm bearings by turning the middle of this here. And I don't have high confidence it was adjusted correctly before, but when I put it back together, I'll try to make sure that it moves freely. So what I figured out is that the position of the tone arm, that is the tilt of it this way, is somewhat adjustable. So this little grooved block here, that is what this sort of pin, this triangular shaped thing, fits into, and that fixes the side-to-side position of the tone arm. However, it looks like that is supposed to be adjustable. So there's a screw that goes in from this direction here that adjusts the position of that, and a spring there that presumably is supposed to make it move in and out, but it was wedged there in place and just wouldn't move at all. So I managed to pry it out. So I'm going to see if I can, through lubrication, maybe a little filing or sanding, get that block to move in and out so I can adjust that tone arm. So I was able to clean up the slides that this block rides on, as well as the block itself a little bit. It actually seemed like there might have been glue on it. Maybe a past repair that somebody didn't know what they were doing. So I was able to clean it up, put some grease on it, and get this to slide in and out. So this screw on the end adjusts the position of that block. Now, was that in the service manual? Of course not, but it seems like a pretty important adjustment. So I've been able to adjust it so the tone arm should no longer be tilting sort of inward toward the record when it's at its rest, but should be more straight. This might require some more fiddling to get it absolutely straight, but that's apparently what was necessary. Okay, I've got it back together, and you can see the tone arm is now actually pointing in the opposite way, the wrong way than it used to be. So I'm going to have to fiddle with that some more to get that tone arm perfectly straight. Okay, as you can see, that's a lot better, and once I have the whole thing back together and maybe a record on there, I can fine-tune that. But that should improve the point where the tone arm sets down as well as where it goes back to the rest. Okay, this is the moment of truth with it all back together. Tone arm looking nice and straight. Gonna hit play. And that is exactly what it's supposed to do. It landed in the right place because the tone arm is now straight. It's incredible that that adjustment that I did is nowhere mentioned in the service manual. It's ridiculous. All right, so let's test the other end of the range. So I'm going to move it over. It's at the end of the record. And it's exactly what it's supposed to do. So I've been so focused on getting the mechanicals of this turntable right, I don't know if it actually makes any sound. So let's find out. There's no hum really, but there's also no sound coming from the left channel. That's not good. So this fault could come from many different places along the signal chain. So it could be the stylus, it could be something wrong with the cartridge, it could be something wrong with the wiring and the tone arm, it could be something wrong with the wiring between the tone arm and the RCA cables, including the RCA cables itself. So I'm going to start with the part that would be easiest to change out, which would be the cartridge. So this uses what's called a P-mount cartridge. This was a standard developed by Techniques, I think in the early 1980s, to make swapping cartridges a lot easier. So the cartridges all have a standardized mount and they all track at 1.25 grams. So removing the cartridge is very simple compared to most turntables. So there's just a single screw on the side and a nut on the other side, which will stay in place. Pull the screw out, and the cartridge comes right out. So the P-mount standard sort of went away with the decline of the turntable market, but fortunately I have another P-mount cartridge that I can try. So this is a Shure cartridge, and since all P-mount cartridges weigh the same so they can have the same tracking force, there's nothing else to adjust, just reinstalling that one screw. So let's give it a shot. And we have sound on both channels, so the cartridge was the culprit. So on the plus side, the simplest solution fixed the problem, which is changing out the cartridge. On the downside, this cartridge is not working, and taking it apart, it's clear why. So if you look at the stylus here, see the little diagonal bit there? So that's one of the magnets that actually creates the electrical current that is your signal. Well, if you notice, there's one of those at a diagonal and not two. There's supposed to be one on the other side, and that would be the one for the left channel. So this stylus is broken and would need to be replaced. So when looking for a new stylus for this cartridge, our options are fairly limited because it's no longer in production, nor are the styli. So it's the equivalent of the Audio-Technica AT100 series, and as you can see, they're pretty expensive, $49.95. I believe this is actually the same one, $27.95, which is a lot of money for a stylus for a cartridge like this. By comparison, an entire cartridge, the Audio-Technica P-mount that is still in production, is $40. So if I was keeping this turntable, I think I'd probably keep the Shure that's on it right now on it. If I'm selling it, I would probably want to keep that cartridge. I'm not sure if I would spend the money on a new cartridge for it or a replacement stylus, because it'd be hard to get my money back and actually selling it for a profit. So in conclusion, this was a very nicely made turntable that was fun to work on, although certainly more finicky than a standard turntable with a pivoting arm. Linear trackers are theoretically technologically superior, but definitely more complicated, which is probably why they faded out as the turntable market faded out as well.